All right, everybody, welcome to Module 2. This is our third week of class, but the first week didn't really count. And so we're starting our first 2 weeks on nutrition. So nutrition is a huge subject. People major in nutrition, right? I mean, the minimum is you take, a 16, 18-week class in nutrition. So in 2 weeks, we're not going to be able to cover a lot. So I'm just going to pick up some of the highlights. And most of you know that I'm was a registered dietitian. So I spent a lot of time teaching nutrition. And my view of nutrition is very traditional. And also the view in the culinology text, the on cooking text, these are all very traditional looks at nutrition. So we don't go into a lot of the other stuff. So, but we'll talk about it, and feel free always to ask me any questions and I'll give you my best answer. So from the discussion, I just want to encourage you all when you're turning in your assignments to include the learning objectives. Include the learning objectives when you do that. These right here, they're always at the top of the page because this is where the question comes from, right? So, like for instance, the question is translate nutrition trends into the development of food products and menus. So I ask you to do the reading and I ask you a bunch of questions, and then that hopefully kind of put you in, the right space. And then, maybe then you could answer this question. So, another is define micro and macro nutrients and illustrates the difference between each. So we're going to talk about the macronutrients today, the carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, and we'll do vitamins next week. I don't think there's a lot of detail there, right? So I don't see where we have to spend hours and hours memorizing the different vitamins and, with their food sources and the deficiencies and all of that sort of stuff. But I'm going to talk about how you can group them together and so that you can remember it a little bit easier. And this one too, define healthy nutrition. So what is healthy nutrition? I think healthy nutrition is the recommended dietary guidelines. And so that's what we're going to focus on. And then the 6 categories of essential nutrients, we can memorize those. So if you read these, answer the questions, and then go back and see if you can answer these. A lot of people will write a little short paragraph under each one, a kind of a summary of what they learned. But you can see that these are really, really vague. So we have to decide how much depth to go into. The other thing is that they can only ask questions that come from either the culinology text or the on cooking text. So while we have 2 other supplementary texts, it's my understanding, I was told there are no questions in either one of those, right? So, and then the last thing about nutrition is that this book was written quite some time ago, and things have changed. Not a lot, but they've changed. Like there's the food guide pyramid in there. Nobody even hardly remembers what that is anymore. So I don't like to teach out of date stuff. So I'm going to teach the current information within the guidelines that we have here. So that's just a little bit about learning um, objectives. The other thing is macronutrients. We're going to have a whole lesson on carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins in this class and in the food science and engineering class. So I'm going to go into the specifics of the HDLs and the LDLs and the cholesterol and all of that information on the mono and the monoglycerides and the and all whatever's. Anyway, I'm going to go into those later. There'll be more information on this, okay, later on. And I guess one of my questions says 4 goals versus 5. So the on cooking text lists 5 goals from the dietary guidelines. It's probably the older dietary guidelines. The new 2020 guidelines only have 4, but it doesn't really make any difference how many they have. It's the concept is very much the same, even though they're worded differently. And so just to know that. And then the finally, then volumetrics is mentioned in this textbook, and it's a great way for weight control. And if you know anybody who's been on Weight Watchers or which is the most common one, the diet plan is based on the volumetrics principle. Lots of fiber, a low fat, a lower, not low, not no fat, but lower in fat and sugar. And so that you can have a large quantity of food, but it's not as nutrient dense. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from. Anybody, any questions? I haven't said anything controversial yet. Let's see what I can do about that. There is some reading. If you've purchased the 5th edition of the Elementary Food Science, it has a great chapter on food literacy. And I think it's just good reading. So you would enjoy reading that. Again, there's not likely to be any questions. But what do we mean by food literacy? So I think in the United States, we are not very food literate. We get a lot of information, but it's piecemeal and it's all, and it's focused and it's can be biased, right? So I think that we are not, and we don't teach nutrition in school anymore. It used to be everybody had to take a nutrition class. Even in junior high, you had to take a cooking class, and we always included a little bit of nutrition there. But those things are kind of by the wayside for now, anyway. So, but what is food literacy? It's a collection of interrelated knowledge, skills, and behaviors required to plan, manage, select, prepare, and eat foods to meet the needs and determine food intake. That means you have to know what you're supposed to eat. You have to be able to plan what you want to eat. You have to be able to cook. A lot of young people today can't cook, right? So, and you need to, to be able to, to eat it carefully and stuff like that. So that's food literacy. So it has a lot of moving parts. And as well as scaffolding that empowers individuals, households, communities, or nations to protect diet quality through change and support dietary resilience. So I think that the food manufacturing industry particularly gets a really bad name, and I don't think we're all that bad, but yet people misuse the food and they misuse the information. So anyway, that's what food literacy is. So it goes on to talk about somebody needs um to there we go. Hi, Michael. I'm gonna mute you. Um so anyway, so I think we've got a bad name, but I do think that we can be more careful about how we plan foods. Obviously, you're not going to be in business if you don't manufacture a food that people want to eat, right? And you'd like them to eat more of it. And so this kind of is a tug of war. And I think right now people are eating way too many snack foods and then not enough meals. And so, so that's part of the reason that we have such an obesity crisis. But I'm a strong believer that there are no good and bad foods as long as all of them are in moderation, right? So definitely have being eaten in moderation, whatever it is. That means you can have chips and ice cream and cake and all of those good things. Hi, Jessica. Good to see you. Okay, so but what we do know about nutrition is that if we overeat and if we become too heavy or obese, there are several metabolic diseases that increase. And these are the ones that we're suffering from in the United States. Diabetes, cardiovascular disease, um, and the heart attacks and strokes and all of those things are based in the fact in based on weight, right? So as we overeat, then those diseases become more, right? So we are suffering from diseases of overconsumption. We never see in the United States, or almost never, unless you see somebody who's eating really, really odd. Do we see any vitamin or minerals deficiencies generally? Anybody want to add anything to this? So this is just the highlights from that chapter on food literacy. So I recommend that you read it. It's in the elementary food science text if you happen to have it. So again, this information I just think is interesting. Anybody add anything and you want to comment?
This is Peter. I just wanted to comment on the point that you have there. The risk of these diseases declined with traditional diets. And by traditional diets, do you mean like traditional diets, like as of like the days like before so many modern processed foods?
Yeah, I think yes, a diet. I think they generally mean traditional diets. I think they mean diets more like maybe the Mediterranean diet, more like that have whole foods in them, right? And um, fruits and vegetables and whole grains and more traditional, like more kind of like the Mediterranean, or like that, or maybe like when I was growing up. Uh, um, but I think that's what they mean by traditional diet.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, that's what I think. Anyway, that's where it should be. Okay, good comment. Thank you. So digestion. So even though this isn't covered, I think it's really important if we're going to understand nutrition that we understand a little bit about the process of digestion. Just because it goes in your mouth doesn't mean it goes in your body, right? So digestion is the process of breaking down food. And we break down everything that we consume to its simplest parts and put it back together. So if we're talking about protein, for instance, we break protein down into the individual amino acids and then build those amino acids up into the proteins that the body needs. Or so that the process of digestion is really important. So things that, like if you've been around children, they tend to eat things they're not supposed to, right? So, and you spend a lot of time looking for them when they come out the other end. There's a lot of toddlers here, right? So, pennies and toys and things like that. But um and also fiber. So what goes in goes out. It's a tube within a tube, right? It's continuous tube. Our digestive tract is within the body, so it's a tube within our body. So in order for us to utilize this stuff, we have to be able to absorb it. So, for instance, when we talk about artificial sweeteners, for instance, there are several, like the sucralose, that aren't absorbed, right? So it's not going to go in. Or if we talk about the artificial sweetener, phenylalanine, right? Not phenylalanine, NutraSweet, right? So we eat it, we digest it into its two individual amino acids, and then we use those amino acids to build other things inside our body. So the NutraSweet itself can't really affect us. It can't poison us because we've digested it. We don't absorb it as NutraSweet that circulates around inside our body and makes us sick, right? We digest it into its individual parts. So I think having an understanding of digestion is really important. So So when we talk about nutrient digestion, there's kind of three different parts. There's the ingestion, you take it into your mouth. Then there's mechanical digestion. Starts in your mouth. We chew it up. We moisten it. We get it a lot of saliva. It moves down. It moves down through the mouth, through the esophagus, past the sphincter right here. So a sphincter is a muscle that's closed except when it's opening, and it's the one that if it doesn't work very good, you get heartburn and indigestion because the food comes back up the esophagus. So once it gets to the stomach, this right here, the stomach is very, very, very acidic. It's, I forget what it is, but it's like 2 or 3. It's very, very, very acidic. So drinking a little lemon juice is not going to make an effect on the stomach, right? It's not going to affect anything, right? Because your stomach is just, it's very, very acidic. And the purpose of that is, one, to denature the proteins, so the proteins come all crinkled up. Like if you take your hair and went like this, and then, it's all crinkled up. So it's going to denature it and straighten that out so we can digest it. The other thing that it's going to do is if there's any bacteria or anything, assuming your gut is working well, you're going to destroy it. You're going to denature that bacteria and kind of keep you from getting sick. Also in the stomach works like, I don't know, when I was a kid, we had a Boda bag, right? And you massage it and everything like that. That's what the stomach is doing. It's mixing up the stomach contents, that acid with the food, and turning it into what we call chyme, CHYME. And chyme is like if you put all your food in a blender and add a little bit of water, it's kind of this pasty stuff. So that's the mechanical digestion. Once that's done, the food moves on into the small intestine, this part right here. And the small intestine is like 30 feet long. It's really, really, really long. And the first part is particularly important for the absorption of nutrients. So not only, so now we've got this food in here, it's very acidic. So the pancreas is going to secrete like baking soda. It's going to neutralize it so that, and also it's going to secrete some enzymes that are going to digest the carbohydrates and, some other things. So that's the pancreas. So now you have this neutral stuff, and it's going to go through the small intestine. So the small intestine has peristalsis, and so it kind of scooches along like a snake swallowing a rat, right? It kind of scooches it along. And this is where the absorption takes place. So the nutrients, the carbohydrates, the lipids, the proteins, all the things are absorbed through the lining of the small intestine. Then what's left is fiber, mostly, and dead cells, right? And that goes into the large intestine. So this part along the outside is the large intestine. And the function of the large intestine is to reabsorb the water, right? So now all the water is reabsorbed, and then what we have left is what we have left, right? So that's kind of how it works. So it's both mechanical and chemical digestion. So the mechanical is moving it and making it into chyme, and then the chemical digestion is breaking each one of these nutrients into its individual smallest parts that we absorb. Anybody have any questions about that? Probably more than you need to know. But I think that if people don't understand digestion, then we don't understand nutrition, right? Because people think if I eat this, like for instance, if I eat lots of calcium, the calcium level in my blood's going to go up. Necessarily how it works, right? This is not a direct relationship. So, okay, anybody, any comments? So carbohydrates are broken into sugar, The monosaccharides, glucose, fructose, and galactose. Starch is broken into glucose. Starch is long chains of glucose molecules put together. So glucose is blood sugar. Fructose and galactose go to the liver and are converted into glucose. So glucose is the blood sugar. Fiber, for the most part, is not digested, and so therefore passes through the body and is eliminated. We'll talk more about fiber later on. There is some interesting research going on right now about fructose and obesity. So the thought is that perhaps fructose is somehow mediating or triggering fat, and triggering obesity. So you might want to be looking for that because our diets right now are artificially high in fructose, all the sodas and things like that. So there's some research on that, a little bit new stuff. Lipids, the fats, are broken down into the individual fatty acids and glycerol, and these are absorbed into the lymph system. So in addition to your blood circulating, you have lymph, and all that goes to the liver, and the liver then converts the fat either into cholesterol or it goes out to the body. And then the proteins are broken down into the individual amino acids that are and absorbed, and then they circulate through the blood for the cells. So once all of that has happened, once we like took the Legos apart, right? Then the body is going to build the Legos back up again into the whatever it is we need, right? So we're going to take in oxygen and water and food, digest that food, and then metabolism is the use of that food for heat and energy. It's kind of the same, right? Heat and energy, or we're going to store it. And turns out we can only really store lipids. We don't store much in the way of protein or carbohydrate, very little of that. So we could, if we overeat, we can store it as fat. Otherwise, we're going to give off some perspiration, some carbon dioxide, and then the whatever else is going to be lost through the urine and feces, all the toxins and stuff that have been removed. So that's metabolism. So we talked about ingestion, digestion, and metabolism. So once we put all of those things together, that really is how the body works. Anybody want to comment or question? All right. Well, anyway, that was just a general overview because I just don't think we can talk about nutrition without talking about kind of having an overview about how the body works. And I'm not sure. So how many of you guys have you taken nutrition? Were you required to take nutrition in your culinary programs? Yes? No?
Yes, yeah, but fairly basic.
Yeah. Right. My daughter's a doctor and she had an 8-week nutrition class with attendance was optional. Anyway, so always drove me crazy. But yeah, I'm sure that most of your culinary programs have basic nutrition, and that's all we're going to need in this class. So in the United States, we every 5 years they publish a new dietary guidelines for Americans. So we're just finishing up the 2020-25. They're working on the 25-30 right now. So if you want to get involved, you're welcome to do that. So the dietary guidelines. And so what they do is they have all the National Academy of Sciences, and they all get together and, people from all different aspects come together and they talk about nutrition. And then they come up with a way that they think the lay person will understand. Also, so this information is for the lay person mostly, but it's also designed for policymakers and nutrition health professionals. So for us health professionals to use, and for policymakers to help design programs, right? And so we do use it as a basis for the federal food, nutrition, and health policy programs. Technically, school food service, supplemental food programs, all of those use the dietary guidelines as a basis for, so that we all talk about nutrition in the same sort of way. That's everybody except the state of California, which is smarter than the rest of the world. Anyway, um, Uh, so then the state, local governments and schools and industry, we all use it. It's designed to promote health and prevent disease. The dietary guidelines are not for sick people. They are only for healthy people. They go from birth to old age. And in general, they're looking at like a 2,000 calorie diet, right? So they kind of based on that for normal, healthy adults. So four, the four pillars of the dietary guidelines 2025 are to follow a healthy diet pattern at every life stage. And this was new in the 2020 they didn't used to cover the first year of life, but now they do. So human milk is the recommendation solely for the first 6 months, and then to introduce solid foods that are high in rich in iron and zinc, the cereals and stuff like that, at 6 months, and then to start feeding whole foods as you move forward from that. If lactation is not an option, then iron fortified infant formula. So the formulas we have today are very, they're well researched, and now that they fix the sanitation problems, they should be perfectly safe. After 12 months of age, we feel that a healthy diet pattern is the same for children as it is for adults, as it is for seniors. By pattern, I mean, the servings of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and things like that. The only thing that's going to change is the portion size. So, while a 12-month-old maybe have a couple of tablespoons of a vegetable, a healthy adult may have a cup of that vegetable, and then a senior, as your calorie needs decline, maybe only a half a cup. So the only thing that truly changes is the serving size. The recommendations for how many servings stay the same. Does that make sense? So the focus of the food groups, you notice that it starts with vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. So that is the focus, right? So if you look at the My Plate that's in the Culinology text, whatever it is, on page 325, we'll notice that half the plate should be fruits and vegetables. Half the plate should be fruits and vegetables. 1/4 would be grains. Then we always recommend a serving of low fat or fat-free dairy, milk, cheese, or lactose-free. And for the vegetarians, a soy beverage or soy yogurt. And then the protein food should be only a 1/4 of the plate. And then oils used lightly. So that's the dietary pattern that is recommended. It's not the way we eat, is it? Most of us tend to, let's put a big steak on there, and then we'll have a baked potato and, well, a few little green beans, right? Or something. But we need to be working more toward half the plate being fruits and vegetables. So along with that, so that's the dietary pattern. So along with that, there are some specific nutrients that are that we need to focus on. One is added sugars. Notice that we're talking about added sugars, not talking about natural sugars. So it doesn't mean don't eat any fruit because it has natural sugar in it. What it means is don't add sugar to your fruit juice or to your, your beverages, right? So looking at 10%. So if you look at 10% of the calories and the normal adult is 2,000 calories, we're talking about 200 calories of added sugar. Not that many, right? And there's 4 calories per gram, so that's what, 50 grams? That seems high. But at any rate, reducing saturated fat to less than 10% of the calories, total fat to 30% or less, and saturated fat 10%, sodium less than 2,300 milligrams. I wouldn't be surprised in the next dietary guideline if it goes to something like 2,000 milligrams per day. If you've been watching the news, you know that the new guidelines for school food service are reducing the sugar and sodium in elementary food service. Right. So those are the 4 pillars that the 2020-2025. The On Cooking has 5 pillars, but this concept haven't changed. And people say to me, nutrition has changed so much over the last 40, 50 years. It really hasn't changed that much. These are all the same things that we were talking about when I was in school. The only thing that's changed is we don't have to eat liver every week, right? That's the only thing that they really truly dropped. None of the rest of this has changed. It's not complicated, right? And it can have a lot of variety, and it's written in a general terms so that's easily adaptable to all the different cultural eating patterns, whether it's Hispanic or Asian or whatever, Middle Eastern, all of the different eating patterns. And that's why it's written in a general terms. And remember that I said there's no good food and there's no bad food. So it means that especially for somebody who's active and normal weight, there could be candy, and chips and sodas and all those things. They're just not meant to be a big part. They're only meant to be a tiny little part of our diet. Any comments or questions? No? Okay. So in the dietary guidelines, they did a great job for each one of this. This happens to be for saturated fat, but there's one for these for sodium and for sugar as well. And it talks about what the sources are, right, for fat and, where we're getting most of our saturated fat. And as you can guess, the sandwich is listed right here because that's going to be the protein, right? Especially if you use like a bologna or a salami or whatever is going to be higher in fat. And we can look here, the higher fat yogurt and milk, only 6%. So that's not where we should put our focus. We should be putting our focus in sandwiches and desserts where there's a lot of saturated fat, maybe a lot of butter, for instance. The rest of these things are much more minor. And then if we look within sandwiches, this is the you know the breakdown, and then this is within the sweet dessert. So ice cream, my favorite, is the highest. So there's a chart like this for every one of the nutrients if you question it. The other recommendation is alcoholic beverages. So this hasn't changed. It's been the same for 20 years. 2 per day for males, 1 or less per day for females, none if you're pregnant. And a drink is 12 ounces of beer and 5 ounces of wine. A little pour of wine, right? So, and as I always used to tell my students, you can't save them all up till Friday night, right? You can't save them all till Friday night and drink all 7 beers on Friday night. That's not how this works, right? So, but drinking in moderation, it doesn't seem to have any, too serious side effects for most people, right? But these are empty calories. So for those of us who are watching our weight or whatever, that maybe we should look at not consuming these, even though they're not going to harm us per se. Those are empty calories, just like sugar is empty calories. And when I say empty calories, I mean that these are calories that don't come with any vitamins and minerals. There isn't much nutrition there. It's just the calories, right? The calories from alcohol, calories from sugar. Okay, so if you're interested in what's happening for 2025, 2030, here's the website. You can go check it out. So what does this mean to us in the food industry? Well, I think that we should be looking at ways that we can include more fruits and vegetables, more whole grains. Think the change from whole wheat that it was brown in color to whole wheat that is white in color is a really good example of how the food industry was able to adapt to including more whole grains in children's foods, in school food service. But still meet these guidelines, but still serve foods that the children enjoy. So they're still using whole grains, but now they're lighter in color. So that I think is a way that was solved. Trying to do low fat or fat-free dairy, greater variety of proteins that are nutrient dense. And this may also include more beans and lentils and tofu or soy and adding those things to expand on the protein. And if we think about our planet and the world, maybe, not that we need to be vegetarians, but maybe we could eat more beans and lentils and things like that. And that definitely falls in the volumetrics. They're low in fat, they're high in fiber, and good sources of protein. So maybe we could augment that way. And so that's a great way for us to include it. Reduce sodium and added sugars. I know this is a lot of the blowback from consumers because they don't like the way it tastes. I do believe that at least in the past, Campbell had been slowly lowering the sodium in their soups so that people wouldn't notice so much. Just kind of slowly, right? Because if you do it all at one time, no, it's not going to go over well. So I believe they're still doing that. So reduce saturated fat with unsaturated fats and reduce refined starches. And then reflect on portion sizes. I was really impressed when I was in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago. I went to this restaurant and they had a big serving of vegetables and it had, I think they were uh, not spinach, the other stuff, chard, Swiss chard. I'm going, oh, anyone ever seen a Swiss chard in a restaurant ever? I really applauded that chef for being able to include some vegetables that might be kind of new to people. And it was an Italian restaurant. I wasn't expecting to have a big serving of vegetables. So we can do it if we want to. I noticed that at my yacht club where I eat a lot, the chefs are really good about serving the al dente vegetables pretty plain without a lot of sauce, and I appreciate that. My plate, I talked about that already, right? So half of the plate, fruits and vegetables, 1/4 grain, 1/4 protein, and that's covered in the culinology text. And that's still current, I think. One of the things that offering, it sets a wide range of offerings. I think we get into a rut. We tend to eat the same thing over and over and over again. And probably you guys not so much because you're chefs and you're creative when it comes to food, but a lot of people do. So it's important to, as much as we possibly can, to offer a wide variety. Anybody have any comments or questions? No, very quiet out there. Probably put you guys to sleep already. They're going, oh God, I wish you'd quit preaching at me. um the culinology text talks about nutrient density, and I want to make the distinction between nutrient density and energy density. Right. So nutrient density, a nutrient dense food, oops, they provide lots and lots of vitamins and minerals and few added sugars, saturated fat, and salt. So nutrient dense broccoli, excellent example. Vegetables, fruits, whole grains, seafood, eggs, beans, lentils. These are all nutrient dense foods. They have a lot of nutrition and not too many calories and not too much sugar, saturated fat, and sodium. Energy density, on the other hand, is the number of calories per amount of food consumed. So foods with a higher fat content are energy dense, but not nutrient dense. So things like fried foods, baked or baked would be versus baked or steamed, right? So fried foods having a lot, and things that are high in fat are going to have a high energy density versus the things that are low in fat. So just be careful when you're doing your reading that you know what you're reading. Is that clear? Yeah. I only see two of you, so nod yes, no. What do you think, Jessica? Does it make sense? Have you heard those terms before? Okay. Danny's going, yes. Okay, good. All right. Then I won't beat this dead horse. So here I included in the handout the difference between typical burrito bowl and a nutrient dense one, and the kinds of changes that we can make in these that will make them more nutrient dense and less energy dense. So I think this is kind of ways, just gives us some ideas. It pretty much is like reducing the fat. And you notice that the volume increases as well. See, there's a little bit more volume here. So, and less calories. This went from 1120 to 715. So by reducing the fat, we were able to have more volume, which is the theory of the volumetrics, and and less calories. So it's just called depends on where we are in the life cycle and who we are. Men need more calories than women because they're bigger, they have a bigger muscle mass. Women are smaller, we have a smaller muscle mass. We don't use as much energy during the day as men do. So, and as we age, as we get older, our muscle mass decreases. We become a little bit less active, and so our calorie needs reduce. Little people need fewer calories than big people, right? Tall, big people get more calories than little people. So little 5-foot lady, doesn't get nearly as many calories. So while maybe an active young male in his 20s might need 2,500 to 3,000 calories a day, a small female maybe 2,000 in her 20s. Maybe by the time she gets to be my age or this into her 60s, maybe only 1,800 or, you know. So as we age, we have to, for women particularly, we have to be more careful about the foods that we're choosing, and there are fewer extras because you really can't have a balanced diet below about 1,800 calories, maybe 1,800 calories is about as low as you can go and still meet all your nutrition requirements. So, but that's all kind of common sense. I think we got cheated as women. Okay. Also, oops, what have I done? Serving size versus portion size. They always make a really big deal. So the portion size is the amount you got served. But the government says that's not a serving size. So every item that you make has a standard serving size, which is what's used on the food label. You don't get to choose willy-nilly what the serving size is going to be for your product. So there's a whole bunch of regulations around, you know, how much it weighs and what size it is, so that the consumer can look at your can of whatever it is and somebody else's can of whatever it is, and they can compare the serving size and they'll get a similar kind of answer. So be sure that you know the difference. A serving size is what the government says it is. A portion size is what you actually plop on your plate. So they're two slightly different things. And in general, the serving size is going to be a lot smaller than you think it should be. So they made them a little bit bigger, but not enough compared to what normal people are eating. And if you had a restaurant and you served the standard serving size, people would come back because they'd feel like they were cheated, right? You didn't give me enough. I used to say that serving sizes were created by a bunch of little old lady dietitians sitting around the table who didn't eat very much. But that's not the case. But at any rate, be sure to be able to recognize the difference between a serving size and a portion size. And here's some examples. So if we're looking at breakfast cereals, 1 cup prepared, 40 grams plain, 55 grams flavored or sweetened. And you know, they always give it in common measurements in grams. Oh, that's hot. So this is cold. So you can look this up. I gave you the link right here, and you can look up your food and see what it is. There's lots of them there. Okay, so for the end, then calculating calories from the nutrition label, I think we should be aware that all carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram. Oops, oh dear, how did I do that? Come back, come back. Oops, too far. So all carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram. The sugars and starches included. Fiber has 0, right? It's not quite 0, but it's almost 0 for our purposes. Is some soluble fiber is broken down and absorbed through the large intestine, but not very much. So it has 0 calories because what goes in goes out. So it's not metabolized, it's not absorbed, it's not metabolized. So what goes in goes out. But as far as the nutrition label goes, it's calculated into the total calories. You can do net calories. I think you have to get a special dispensation, or you have to make it say it specially on the label. But net calories is if you subtract the starch, the fiber from the starch. That would give you net calories. but net carbs, I guess they call it net carbs. But most labels include the total, the carb fiber in the total calorie computation for carbohydrate. Protein, 4 calories per gram. Fat, all kinds, 9 calories per gram. So if you look at the new nutrition facts label, and this is the new label, but it's not very new anymore because it's been around for quite a while, but they did make some changes to it. They took calories from fat off of here. They made serving sizes bigger, you know, the front bigger, servings per container. They made calories a lot bigger, right? So because too many calories is the problem. So this is telling us that 2/3 of a cup is 230 calories. Then if we want to calculate the fat, we want to end up with 230 calories. How'd they get that? They took the total fat right here, total fat. So in this case, it's 8 grams. Oops, 8 grams. Right, so 8 times 9, 72. Total carbohydrate, 37 grams. Notice that this 37 grams includes the fiber and starch. Starch isn't listed, but it includes fiber and starch. And the protein, 3 grams. You add those all together. And that's how you get 232, which all of this is rounded. So the numbers are all rounded, so you're never going to end up with exactly the same amount. And then when we looked at total diet, we see that people are deficient in vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. And so these are the ones that are listed at the bottom of the label to get people to eat, you know, to recognize whether it's a good source or not. And then sodium doesn't have any calories, so it's not calculated. All right. Oh, gosh, I made it. Any comments or questions? Very quiet out there in Never Land, in student land. Okay, I did say that I would stay after and show you how to do a Quizlet quiz, so I will do that. A couple people showed up late. Michael, I see that you're here.
I am, yes.
And who else showed up late?
I did, Jessica.
Jessica. Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
No problem. That happens. There you go. I just want to make sure I have you. So I have Nick is not here, and Sharon, I guess I could turn off the recording. Okay. Let me stop the recording.